Hey everyone. So this past Friday in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan signed what's being called a NATO-style mutual defense pact, meaning if you attack one of these countries, you've attacked all of them. Turkey's own foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, even said that it's technically the same as NATO's Article 5. Article 5 of NATO is exactly that if any NATO state gets attacked, all NATO states are under attack. So they signed this agreement. I'm going to read you the actual Reuters report on this, what's being called the Mecca Agreement. And I'm going to stop wherever there's something worth unpacking. And we're going to notice a few things, like who's not part of this pact, what Pakistan has already done and not done under an earlier version of something like this pact. And by the end of the video, I'm going to show you why probably none of this actually matters, because no one in the Middle East ever honors agreements like this. But we'll get into that as we go. So stick around. Let's start with, so here's the Reuters piece. Let's pull it up on screen. Just give me a sec here. Here it is. Reuters. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Pakistan pledge mutual defense as Middle East turmoil escalates. Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey signed a joint defense agreement in Mecca on Friday, wedding Sunni Muslim U.S. allies alarmed at a regional conflagration that has brought Iranian missile fire onto Gulf oil exporters. Now, wedding is a good term. 3 Sunni majority U.S. allies getting married to each other. Cute. But hold on to that word, because a wedding has a guest list, and I want you to notice who's not on it. We're going to come back to that, who's not part of this agreement. And it then goes on to say here, the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement is intended to strengthen collective deterrence against any act of aggression and stipulates that an armed attack against any of the three would be regarded as an attack on all, they said in a joint statement. However, the statement did not give specifics on the commitments each had accepted. Did not give specifics on the commitments each had accepted, and it was not clear how far their agreement would bind them to any particular military action in each other's defense. Okay, so what does all that mean? No specifics on the commitments, right? Not clear how far it would bind them. Look, that's basically the whole story of this. I'm going to spend the rest of the video giving you the reasons why this vagueness is a feature, not a bug. It's almost the point of these agreements, but we'll get into that in a minute. Let's keep going. Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yilmaz said the agreement was not aimed at any specific country. Oh, we have no specific country in mind. A Turkish official added that it was purely defensive and did not abrogate any existing agreements the countries had with other states. Oh, that's so nice. It's not against anybody, because everyone's first question when you hear about this agreement is this directed at Israel? Is it directed at Iran? Erdogan talks about wanting to destroy Israel. And, I don't think this is about Israel. I think there's a tendency by people in the pro-Israel camp to think everything's about us. Because, look, Turkey has NATO ties it doesn't want to mess with. It also doesn't really want to get into a shooting war with anybody, as I laid out in a video last week. Hopefully you saw it on this channel, where I went into the Turkish economy and how Turkey really needs to avoid a real war. But it does give Erdogan, this definitely emboldens him to ramp up his rhetoric against Israel, and gives him like this sense of insurance, because he has this new alliance with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And by the way, the Pakistanis said the same thing, that this is not against any third country, right? So what is it? It's not about Iran. It's not about Israel. It's not about anybody. Okay, fine. So what is it about? The three nations share concerns about the increasingly aggressive military stances of both Israel and revolutionary Shiite Iran, as their longtime U.S. ally struggles to contain regional upheaval that has caused a global energy crisis. Three of the Muslim world's, this is a quote from this expert, quote, "Three of the Muslim world's most influential states are convening at a moment of heightened uncertainty, demonstrating a growing willingness among regional and middle powers to coordinate more closely on security matters," said Abdulaziz Sager, chairman of the Gulf Research Center, a Saudi-based think tank. So I mentioned before the guest list, like who's not involved here. Let me tell you what I had in mind. When I first read about this Mecca Agreement, my first thought was, where's Qatar? You see, if this was really a Sunni bloc forming, maybe that's what it is, but where's Qatar? You'd expect Qatar to be part of this. I mean, Turkey's involved, Pakistan's involved. These are Qatar's buddies, right? In all of the negotiations during this war, it's been Pakistan and Qatar that have been the mediators. And then you have the Turkey-Qatar relationship that's pretty comprehensive over the last few years. Why are they not in this deal? So here's what I think. Back in September 2025, after Israel struck Hamas operatives, Hamas leadership in Doha, Qatar. Remember, very controversial. Israel carried out an airstrike in Qatar. Trump got annoyed and he signed an executive order. Trump signed an executive order committing the U.S. to treat an attack on Qatar as requiring a U.S. response, like a NATO Article 5 guarantee. So that's an American guarantee to Qatar. Also, Qatar doesn't really have its own military. It does, but really Qatar is a vassal state from a security standpoint of the United States, and it doesn't need to layer a Sunni commitment in this alliance on top of that. And it could put it in a position of acting against American or Israeli interests. Again, Qatar is functionally a security dependent of the U.S. It has much less of its own military than these three countries do, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. And also, I wouldn't read this necessarily as like, this is the Sunni axis rising, although some might read it that way. I plan to talk to Dr. David Wormser about it today for the Israel 365 news channel. We'll see what he says. I know he's been very concerned about a Sunni alliance, a growing Sunni alliance. But the reason that I'm hedging on that is that Saudi Arabia under MBS designated the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization in 2014, and it spent a decade fighting like Brotherhood-aligned Islamism in many places, while at the same time in Yemen, they're propping up Brotherhood-aligned actors. So it's hard to say that definitively, but the Saudis are not, my point is that the Saudis are not really in the same Sunni camp right now as Erdogan's Turkey, which is the Brotherhood's most powerful patron, or Qatar, which is the money behind the Brotherhood. I think we have to look at this Mecca Agreement more as MBS in Saudi Arabia making a pragmatic arrangement with the leader of, with the leader of Turkey, who they've been kind of trying to contain and be on good terms with, because the Iran war forced their hand. I think this is more of a truce between Sunni rivals more than a real legitimate alliance. Okay, that's my initial take here. Let's move on in this Reuters piece. Turkey has NATO's second largest military. Saudi Arabia is home to Islam's holiest sites and one of the world's top oil exporters, while Pakistan is the only nuclear-armed Muslim country. However, Riyad Krimli, Saudi Deputy Minister for Public Diplomacy, so this is someone speaking for the Saudi government, said in a social media post that the accord does not represent an effort to establish a military axis or a sectarian bloc. This isn't a Sunni thing, and this isn't a military axis. Well, then what is it? Nor is it linked to any nuclear ambitions or arm race. And it's got nothing to do with nuclear, right? He's very, very quick to clarify those things. It's not a military alliance. No, no, no. Now, if you just read those two paragraphs back to back, what does Reuters just say here? One of the three signatories is the only nuclear-armed Muslim country. And in the next paragraph, this Saudi official insisting that it's nothing to do with anything nuclear. I'm not saying he's lying, but when you put an unprompted denial in there like that, like, oh, this is not against any country, and it's not nuclear, and it's not really a military axis. Think about what all those denials really mean. Let's move on, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Although Pakistan agreed to a mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia last year, it has not responded to Iran's attacks on the kingdom militarily. It has also played down suggestions its nuclear deterrent might be extended to allies, saying last year of its pact with Saudi Arabia that atomic weapons were not on the radar. Oh. So Pakistan already has a signed mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia. An attack on one is an attack on both of us. That was that pact, and it's a year old, September 2025. Since September 25, Iran has been attacking Saudi Arabia on and off by, with missiles for the last 5 months. And Pakistan has done nothing. So they have a mutual defense pact, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is getting attacked by Iran. Pakistan has done nothing. Okay, and that's not a hypothetical about whether these agreements mean anything. I said at the beginning of the video that I'll get to this point, that no one keeps agreements like this in the Middle East. We see it right here. Okay, this agreement, in other words, Saudi Arabia already has an agreement like this just with Pakistan. In fact, the real way to understand this Mecca Agreement is Turkey joining the Pakistan-Saudi Arabia Mutual Defense Pact. But Pakistan has shown the whole world for the last few months that they haven't honored it. Okay, and we shouldn't be surprised, because Pakistan's actual behavior in this war has never really been against Iran. They haven't really been on the side of those countries that Iran is attacking. I've laid this out in a number of videos over the last few months about Pakistan. CBS News reported earlier in the war, like during the ceasefire, and let me pull this up. This was a story. Pakistan quietly hosted Iranian military aircraft during the U.S. war, despite public mediator role. They were shielding Iranian aircraft from U.S. strikes while they were playing neutral mediator. Pakistan's foreign ministry called, they kind of were like, oh, that's just sensation, that's sensationalized reporting. It's fake news, but they didn't really deny it. They kind of confessed that it happened. Pakistan also opened overland trade routes after the U.S. put a blockade on Iranian ports. Pakistan opened up 6 overland trade routes with the express purpose of helping Iran break the blockade. And Trump knew about it. Trump said he knew about it. He didn't say he was happy about it, but he said he knew about it. And 6 weeks before this Mecca Agreement was signed, Iran's president, Pezeshkian, flew to Islamabad to meet with Pakistan's army chief, Field Marshal Munir. And according to IRNA, Iran's state media agency, those discussions covered security and defense cooperation. Pakistan's military called the same meeting peace initiatives. Either way, they were talking about security. The Iranians and the Pakistanis, bottom line, the Iranians and the Pakistanis have been working together. The Pakistanis have been helping the Iranians throughout this war. So before we get all excited about how Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and Turkey are now creating this defense alliance against Iran, let's think about that. Now, the Pakistani-Iranian relationship, just to review some things that were in an earlier video, it's a much deeper relationship. The father of Pakistan's nuclear program, this guy named Abdul Khan, what's his middle name? He had a funny, Abdul Qadir Khan. He's the guy who built Pakistan's nuclear program. He sold the nuclear centrifuges to Iran that started the Iran nuclear program. He trained the first Iranian nuclear scientists back in the 80s. Iran was his first customer. He had this international network. He sold nuclear equipment to North Korea, to Libya, okay? And he was the head of the Pakistani nuclear program. The Pakistani government denied any involvement and said he was a rogue actor, but that it's very implausible. No one really believes that. The scale of Khan's operation and the fact that he was the head of the Pakistani nuclear program made that kind of, no one really believes that. But the Pakistani equipment, the original centrifuge technology, is still the foundation of Iran's enrichment program to this day. Anyway, look, and then let's look at Pakistan's involvement with China. Okay, Pakistan's entire foreign policy approach throughout this war, including all the mediation efforts, has been coordinated with China. They've said that. The Pakistani foreign minister has openly said that he's coordinated everything with Wang Yi, the Chinese Communist Party foreign minister. China holds 22% of Pakistan's external debt. So Pakistan is kind of owned and operated by China. And they're helping. So let's put it all together. Helping shelter Iranian jets during Epic Fury, helping Iran get around the American blockade and dodge sanctions, taking security meetings with Tehran. And meanwhile, of course, J.D. Vance is saying that the Field Marshal of Pakistan is one of his favorite people on the planet. Anyway, Bottom line is this: Pakistan has been Iran's lifeline throughout this entire war, and they've also have helped Iran build their nuclear program going back decades. So let's, take this whole alliance with Saudi Arabia and Turkey against Iran with a grain of salt. Okay, let's move on with the story a little bit more here. Friday, let's go to what does it say here? Let's pull it up. Friday's pact was signed in Mecca by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, and Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and follows nearly a year of negotiations, reported by Reuters in January. Interesting. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction to Iran's behavior since the war began at the end of February. Reuters reported that this deal, Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, was in the works back in January. So this isn't exactly improvised. Interesting. Bruce Ozalik, senior research fellow for Middle East security at the Rusi think tank, said the agreement was focused on counterbalancing Iranian hegemony in the region and building deterrence against Israel rather than moving towards a confrontation with Tehran. I think the objective is very much the opposite, Ozalik said. Okay, so we have this Western analyst saying that this isn't really about confronting Iran. And now let's take a look at Iran's reaction. Okay, there was an Iranian parliamentarian, Razai, he's an important parliamentarian. He's on their defense committee. Look what he wrote here on X. Saudis must know that a paper agreement with Turkey and Pakistan will not bring them security, just as years of one-sided nursing to the Americans did not bring them security. Meaning, just like you depended on the Americans for all these years and that didn't bring you security, this is not, they're saying to the Saudis, this isn't going to bring you security anyway. Reform your policies so that you don't need to beg for security from others. So they're kind of taunting the Saudis. And then we have this piece on Iranian state media on WANA, Mecca Agreement. This is their analysis of the Mecca. This is the Iranian state media analysis of this Mecca Agreement. It was the front page on WANA yesterday. Ambitious security pact faces practical challenges. And look what they say in this piece. It's actually a pretty good piece of analysis. One of the most significant examples here, they're saying what they do in this piece is they look at Saudi Arabia's previous alliance building efforts as a measure for what to expect from this one. Look what they write here. One of the most significant examples was the Operation Decisive Storm coalition launched in 2015 alongside the beginning of Saudi Arabia's military campaign in Yemen. Riyadh sought to highlight broad Arab and Islamic support for the operation, but in practice, the main military role was carried out by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, while many other members provided mainly political or diplomatic backing. Another example was the Islamic Military Counterterrorism Coalition, introduced in 2015, with the participation of dozens of Muslim majority countries. Despite its extensive initial publicity, the coalition failed to develop into a unified operational structure with a clearly defined mission. Saudi Arabia's initiative to establish a security framework in the Red Sea also faced challenges. Then it jumps down. For defense agreements to become effective alliances, they typically require legal mechanisms, joint command structures, intelligence coordination, and logistical infrastructure. The details released so far about the Mecca Agreement do not indicate that such structures have been clearly established or are even being established. One of the key differences between this agreement and alliances such as NATO is the absence of a permanent command body with a clearly defined authority. The three member states also have different security priorities. Saudi Arabia focuses largely on developments in the Gulf region and Yemen. Pakistan prioritizes security concerns related to India, while Turkey places greater emphasis on border security, Syria, and developments in the Eastern Mediterranean. The inclusion of Turkey in defense cooperation with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan could increase the agreement's political weight, but previous regional alliances have shown that adding more members does not necessarily lead to greater coordination. In other words, what they're saying about this agreement in Iran is it's all just nonsense on paper. It's not really going to go anywhere. That's really what they're saying. Okay? Finally, let's get to the end of the Reuters piece here. We get all the way at the bottom, the last line. So interesting. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office declined to comment. A spokesperson for India's foreign ministry said the pact was a development that the country was closely following. Iran did not immediately comment. Okay. Before we go down to this last piece of the puzzle here, I want to make sure that you are that you're aware of this important event that we're hosting a week from today, next Sunday, August 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. in Israel. Mamdani's New York City, a warning to America, an amazing webinar panel discussion. Look at this panel we have. I'm so excited about it. We have former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. We have Shabbos Kestenbaum, who's one of the young, brilliant public intellectuals. He's a commentator and writer for PragerU. We have Robert Spencer, the prolific author and founder of jihadwatch.org. And we have Rabbi Daniel Schoenbach of Rabbi for America, who's been at the forefront of the anti-Mamdani protests and activism in the Jewish community in New York. So that's next Sunday, August 16th. Sign up for the webinar. Even if you can't make it, when you register for the webinar, you will receive a link to the full webinar after it airs live. So you can watch it on your own time. You don't have to be available at this time to register, and you can register by going to the link in the description of this video. That's israel365.com/Mamdani, or you can scan the QR code that's on your screen, and you will register for the webinar. Make sure you're registered. Again, you don't have to be there to watch it live. Okay, let's go back to the end of our story. So we had that final quote in the piece about Prime Minister Netanyahu, that he declined to comment, and India's foreign ministry said that they were closely following this. So what does all that mean? So here's my take. Here's my take on this. Netanyahu's office being silent is a very smart choice, because any reaction to this deal would be a mistake. If any reaction would either look like Israel's nervous about this Sunni bloc, which would hand Erdogan a propaganda win. That's what he wants. He wants Israel to get nervous and to say something and to saber rattle. Or it could look like Israel is legitimizing this deal. Basically, silence is the right move in this case. In terms of India saying they're closely following it, India's foreign ministry used almost the exact same language almost a year ago in September 2025, when the original Saudi-Pakistani version of this deal went into effect. They also said the same thing. And they have real issues with both Turkey and Pakistan. So let's go back. In May 2025, there was a terror attack in Pahalgam, India. And India then retaliated by hitting terrorist targets inside Pakistan. And Turkey Turkey at the time backed Pakistan, and there was like this war between Pakistan and India. And Turkish military operatives were reportedly on the ground helping Pakistan coordinate drone strikes against India. And two of these Turkish military operatives were reportedly killed in Indian strikes. And now we have Pakistan and Turkey getting together in this mutual defense pact. So that's why at the end of this article, you have a line that out of the blue in comes this line that says that India says they're closely monitoring it. This is two very significant adversaries of India are again, Pakistan and Turkey, and they're signing this mutual defense pact. So that's where I land on this. What did I deal with here? Why is Qatar not in this? The fact that a truce between Sunni rivals is not really a unified bloc. Most importantly, nobody keeps agreements like this. Pakistan has already failed this test once. There are numerous examples. I didn't even go through all of them, going all the way back to a pact between Arab states back in 1950, over and over again in the Middle East. Whenever there are joint defense pacts that are signed, they're never honored. No one ever comes to anyone else's aid. The Arab League Joint Defense Pact, 1950, never functioned. 2015, 40 plus countries sign on to the Islamic Military Counterterrorism Coalition, which never did anything, never was operational. There was the Decisive Storm Coalition in Yemen, and that was supposed to be all these Arab countries. It ended up just being Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Everyone else just put out statements. And the Gulf states have a joint reaction force, the rapid reaction force that's never really, it's only been used once to crush an internal uprising in Bahrain, not to repel any outside attacker. They didn't use it against Iran when Iran attacked them. So, look, the article gave proof already. It mentioned that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed a mutual defense pact a year ago. Iran's been firing missiles at Saudi Arabia intermittently over the last 5 months, and Pakistan has never lifted a finger for them. So if no one's going to honor this pact, if no one's going to honor this Mecca Agreement, why do we care? Well, we care. First of all, Pakistan is a nuclear power. We have to keep that in mind. And it also signals to the Americans that there's less trust in American security guarantees. Why else would the Saudis be going into this? Again, like the Indians said, it's worth watching. But basically all we have now is a signing ceremony in a beautiful setting with beautiful language. I don't think it's a real security guarantee, but yeah, it's definitely worth paying attention to. All right, please like, subscribe, all the rest, and we'll see you on the next one. God bless.